Let's look at probability as it relates to genetics. Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk who carried out breeding experiments with plants. Certain pea plants come from a group which always produces smooth peas. Others come from a group which always produce wrinkled peas. What do you get if you cross these plants, if you mate these plants with each other? You get smooth peas! You get plants that produce smooth peas. Now, what do you get if you cross those plants with each other? In other words, the product of this cross. Well, mostly smooth peas, but some wrinkled peas. How do we explain this? Wrinkled or smooth is a hereditary trait. Every plant has two copies of this gene, one inherited from the father plant and one inherited from the mother plant. Now, the always smooth family, the copies of the genes look like this. We'll call them AA, capital A, capital A. And as for the copies of the genes that come from the always wrinkled family, again, they have two copies of this gene. They have little a, little a. Now, but a plant can pass on only one copy of its two genes to the next generation. So again, here we have genes from the smooth plant. Now again, each plant has two copies of this gene. This is the family that always produces, this is the family that always produces smooth peas. So we've got AA. This is the family that always produces wrinkled peas. All of them produce wrinkled peas, all the members of this family. And that's little a, little a. And when you cross these two, you get plants that produce smooth peas. Notice, you might think, well, gee, would we get maybe half smooth, half wrinkled? Will we get somewhat wrinkled? No, actually they're all smooth. They look just like, they look just like the smooth parent. They don't look at all like the wrinkled parent. So, smooth is the dominant trait. Wrinkly is the recessive trait. Okay, whoops. So in this case, here's what we mean by dominant trait. Notice that these peas, the product of these offspring, the product of this match between the smooth parent and the wrinkled parent, they have the smooth gene and they also have the wrinkled gene. They don't cancel out, they don't moderate. Instead, this smooth gene is what we call a dominant gene. It doesn't matter what the other gene is, whether it's a wrinkled or a smooth gene. This smooth gene dominates. As long as you have this smooth gene, you're going to have a plant that produces smooth peas. And notice, since this parent has both smooth genes and this parent has both wrinkled genes, the kids, the baby plants, they're all going to have one smooth gene and one wrinkled gene. But because the smooth gene is dominant, it doesn't matter what this guy is. The offspring are all going to have smooth peas. Now, what do you get when you cross these two? In other words, when you take these guys over here, sorry, this is kind of messy. When you take these guys and cross them with each other, what do you get? Well, again, here's what these guys look like. Again, they have one smooth gene from one parent and one wrinkly gene from another parent. And ditto with the other one, smooth and wrinkly. Now, when you cross them with each other, and again, it's just as likely that a plant can only pass on one gene. And it's just as likely that it'll pass on this one as it'll pass on this one. Here's what we end up with. So so 1/4 of the offspring will look like this, 1/4 like this, 1/4 like this, and 1/4 like that. Now, roughly 3/4 of the plants produce smooth peas, and 1/4 produce wrinkly peas. Why? It's because smooth is the dominant trait, and wrinkly is the recessive trait. Notice that for all of these, have a smooth gene. Okay, this guy's got two smooth genes, this guy's got one, this guy's got one. So all of these will produce smooth peas. This one alone will produce wrinkly peas because wrinkly is the recessive trait. If you have a smooth gene, even if the other gene is wrinkly, you're going to produce smooth peas. It's only this guy, this is the only one that can produce wrinkly peas. He has two copies of that wrinkly gene. Does this apply only to plants? No, it applies to human beings as well. Here's an example of an interesting dominant versus recessive trait. The dominant trait is the ability to taste phenylthiocarbamide And the recessive trait is the inability to taste phenylthiocarbamide. Now, if you can taste it, it tastes pretty bitter. And if you can't taste it, and that's what I am, you can't, it just is tasteless. Tasteless whatsoever. Now, 70% of the population has this trait. 70% of the people taste this as a bitter chemical. And 30% of the world's population can't taste it at all. I'm in this 30% because I've tasted a little tab of paper with the phenylthiocarbamide on it, and it doesn't taste like anything at all.